Hello everyone, and welcome to my The Bold Fans channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Hope stood in the low light of her bathroom, the gentle hum of the overhead fan breaking the silence. The thin plastic stick in her fingers trembled slightly, its two pink lines looking back at her like an unappealable decision. Pregnant. The word repeated in her head, hard and unyielding as her knees buckled. She slumped to the cold tile floor, her back against the bathtub, clutching the test as if it could change its mind if she gripped it tightly enough. It had been 3 weeks since she stopped her relationship with Carter. It had been 3 weeks since she sat across from him at their favorite coffee shop, the one with the chipped mugs and the overly loud jazz music, and told him they would be better off apart. She meant it then, or so she believed. Their relationship had been gradually dissolving, a tapestry of minor conflicts and incompatible dreams that neither could ignore any longer. Carter desired security, a life laid out in tidy columns and rows, whereas Hope sought something less predictable, more alive. They had fought, reconciled, then fought again until the weight of it all became too much. "I can't keep pretending that this is enough," she replied, her voice firm despite the pain in her chest. Carter nodded after looking at her with dark eyes searching for something she couldn't provide. "I know," he replied simply, and that was that. They had parted ways quietly, with no shouting or tears, only agreeing that love was not always enough. Now, sitting on the bathroom floor, Hope felt the world shift. Pregnant. How does this happen? They had been cautious, mostly. There was that one night, after too much alcohol and too little sleep, when they clung to each other as if they could stop time. But that was months ago, right? She rubbed her fingertips against her temples, attempting to put together the timeline. Her cycle had always been irregular, and she had chalked up the missed periods to stress and the craziness of her new position at the design firm. But now the reality was unmistakable. She remembered Carter, his firm hands, and how he always left her coffee on the counter just the way she liked it. Black, no sugar, and steaming hot. She recalled his chuckle, uncommon but pleasant, like sunlight breaking through clouds. And she reflected on how she had walked away from him, confident it was the correct thing to do, only to find herself linked to him in unexpected ways. Hope did not cry. She wanted to cry, but they wouldn't come. Instead, she felt a deep pain, a grief that seeped into her bones like wet ice. She was 29, single, and ready to be a mother. The life she had envisioned, late evenings sketching designs, impromptu journeys to nowhere, a future she could mold on her own terms, felt like it was slipping through her fingers. Carter sat in his little apartment across town, the TV flickering with an unwatched game. His phone vibrated on the coffee table, but he ignored it. Since the breakup, he'd pushed himself into work, working additional shifts at the hospital where he was a nurse. The long hours kept his mind busy and prevented him from revisiting the moment Hope walked out of his life. He had loved her, and still did, to be honest, but he had let her go because he believed it was what she needed. Carter was skilled at prioritizing other people's needs over his own. It was why he chose nursing, why he stayed late to console patients, and why he never forced Hope to stay when she refused. His phone buzzed again and he peered at it. A text from Finn, his oldest friend and the only person who had seen him through every heartbreak. "You alright, man? I haven't heard from you in a while." Carter sighed and rubbed his palm across his face. Finn had witnessed Hope's relationship flourish and then wilt. Finn, with his easy charm and skill for saying the perfect thing, had cautioned him that Hope was like a wildfire, beautiful but impossible to control. Carter had not listened. He'd wanted to be the one to hold her and keep her grounded, and for a while it worked. He quickly scribbled a response. "I'm alright, just busy," and put the phone down. But he wasn't okay. He missed her. I missed the way she hummed off-key while cooking and left half-finished doodles all around his flat. He missed the way she looked at him, like if he were the only thing that mattered, even though he knew she was already halfway out the door. Carter wasn't aware of the pregnancy test. He had no idea that Hope was sitting on her bathroom floor, dealing with a future neither of them had foreseen. If he had, he would have been there in a heartbeat because that was who he was, consistent, dependable, and always on time. But Hope hadn't phoned, and Carter wasn't one to press. Finn, meanwhile, was at a downtown bar, sipping a beer and attempting to ignore the weight of his own secrets. He'd known Hope and Carter since college, and he'd introduced them at a party where Hope spilled red wine on Carter's shirt and laughed so hard she sobbed. Finn had always been the glue that held everyone together, but recently he felt like he was falling apart. He had been in love with Hope for years. It wasn't anything he had planned or even desired. It had creeped up on him, slowly and insidiously, until it became too large to ignore. He'd never said anything, neither while she was dating Carter or after they broke up. Finn was skilled at hiding problems and acting as a helpful friend, but seeing Hope made it ache even more. And now that she was single again, he believed there could be a chance. However, he had not taken action on it. Not yet. He told himself it was because he didn't want to complicate matters, but deep down he was afraid she'd say no. Finn scowled as his phone lit up with Carter's reply. "I'm fine, just busy." Bullshit, he thought. Carter was not well, and neither was he. He took a long swig of his beer, wondering how things had gotten so complicated. He had no idea Hope was pregnant, or that the woman he loved was about to make a life-changing decision. If he had, he might have finally spoken up, taken the risk. But instead he sat alone in a packed pub, carrying a love he wasn't sure he'd ever admit. Hope's mother, Sheila, was the last to find out. Hope and her mother had always been close, but their relationship was complicated, with passionate affection and unset expectations. Sheila had raised Hope on her own after her father abandoned her when she was 6 years old, and she had invested everything in her daughter. Every hope, dream, and sacrifice. When Hope called, her voice quivering, and told her about the pregnancy, Sheila's immediate emotion was shock, followed by a quiet, piercing despair. Sheila sat at her kitchen table, phone still in hand, gazing at the worn flowery tablecloth she'd owned since Hope was a toddler. She recalled the nights she'd stayed up, thinking about how to pay the bills and give Hope the life she deserved. She wanted so much for her daughter. A job, a lasting love, and a life devoid of the difficulties Sheila had experienced. And now Hope was pregnant, alone, and terrified. Sheila felt the weight like a stone in her chest. She made no inquiry as to the father's identity. She recognized Carter, the man she had always admired but never trusted to keep up with her daughter's wild spirit. Sheila had seen Hope and Carter's love for each other, but she had also seen the fissures, the fact that they wanted different things. Sheila had hoped they'd work things out, but when Hope informed her of the separation, she wasn't surprised. Disappointed but not surprising. However, everything had changed. Sheila wanted to rectify it, make things right for her kid, but she didn't know how. She considered calling Carter and ordering him to step up, but she stopped herself. This was Hope's decision, her life. All Sheila could do was be present, even if it meant watching her daughter struggle. Hope did not inform Carter right away. She wanted to, but whenever she picked up her phone, her fingers froze. What will she say? "Hey, do you recall the life we determined didn't work? Surprise! We're having a baby." She imagined his expression, the way his brow furrowed as he processed it, and how he'd almost certainly volunteer to do the right thing because that was who he was. But she didn't want him to return because of obligation. She wanted him to desire her, to want them as they used to be. Days stretched into weeks, and Hope still hadn't told anyone other than Sheila. She went to work, smiled at her coworkers, drew designs for clients, and pretended everything was normal. But at night, alone in her apartment, she would place her hand on her stomach and ponder what kind of mother she would be. She was continually thinking about Carter, his kindness, patience, and the way he had made her feel protected. She also thought about Finn, his easy smile, and how he always seemed to know what she needed before she did. And she thought about Sheila, who had sacrificed so much to raise her and had never complained. Hope was at a coffee shop one evening, not the one she and Carter used to frequent, but a new one with overly bright lighting and pricey cakes. She was doodling in her notebook, attempting to immerse herself in the lines and curves, when Finn entered. He recognized her immediately, his face lighting up in a way that made her heart wrench. "Hey, stranger," he said, taking the seat across from her. "You look like you're solving world peace." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just doodling." Finn bent his head, examining her. "Are you okay?" Hope attempted to lie and say she was okay, but Finn's eyes stopped her. Perhaps it was the way he looked at her, as if he could see through every barrier she'd created. Perhaps it was the exhaustion from carrying the secret alone. Whatever it was, she found herself telling him everything: the pregnancy, the split, and her anxiety that she wasn't prepared for any of it. Finn listened, his expression unreadable, and when she was finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. "You're not alone," he stated calmly. "Whatever happens, I'm here." Hope felt a lump in her throat, but she didn't tear her hand away. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely lost. Carter found out by mistake. He was at the hospital, finishing a double shift, when Sheila arrived with a sprained wrist after a fall at work. They had always gotten along, so when she saw him, she didn't hesitate to take him aside. "Hope's pregnant," she replied quietly but firmly. "She hasn't told you yet, but you deserve to know." Carter felt as if the air had been pulled from the room. He stood there in his scrubs, attempting to digest the words. Pregnant. Hope. His child. He wanted to ask a million questions. When? How? Why didn't she tell me? But all he could do was nod. "Go to her," Sheila instructed, her eyes softening. "She needs you, even if she won't admit it." Carter didn't leave immediately. He needed time to think and find exactly what this meant. He loved Hope, but he let her go because he believed it was what she wanted. Everything had changed, and he was unsure where he belonged in. Carter arrived at Hope's apartment late, with the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. She opened the door, and for a few moments, they simply stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. "Sheila told me," he finished, his voice rough. "Why haven't you?" Hope's eyes flooded with tears, but she blinked them away. "I did not know how. I didn't want you to feel trapped," Carter said, taking a step closer with his hands clasped. "Trapped? Hope, I love you. I never stopped. If you'd informed me, I'd have come here." She shook her head, her voice shaking. "I did not want you to return because of the baby. I wanted you to come back because you wanted me." "I do," he murmured, his voice raw and honest, making her chest hurt. "I always did." They stood there, the distance between them closing, and for the first time in weeks, Hope felt a glimmer of hope. Not the word, but the sensation. Perhaps they can figure it out. Perhaps they could form a family. Finn, however, was suffering. He had meant what he said to Hope. He would be there no matter what. But witnessing her and Carter reconnect was like a knife in his chest. He wanted to be happy for her and for them, but the part of him that loved her refused to let go so easily. He kept his distance, made reasons to miss their group hangouts, and immersed himself in work, hoping it would alleviate the pain. Sheila, too, was dealing with her feelings. She was happy that Hope and Carter were attempting to make it work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that history was repeating itself. She had been a single mother, and it had been difficult, more so than she had ever told Hope. She didn't want that for her kid, but she also realized she couldn't keep her safe from everything. Months later, Hope sat in her apartment, hand resting on her expanding belly. Carter was there, his head bowed over a baby name book, reading recommendations aloud while she chuckled at the absurd ones. They weren't perfect and they still had disagreements, but they were trying. And that was enough for now. Finn was still in her life and a friend, but there was a subtle sadness in his eyes that she couldn't ignore. Sheila was also present, already knitting tiny blankets and offering counsel that Hope wasn't sure she needed but appreciated. The sadness lingered for Hope, who'd lost the life she'd planned, for Carter, who'd nearly lost her, for Finn, who'd never fully had her, and for Sheila, who wanted to protect her daughter from the harsh realities of life. But there was also love there, twisted and messy and genuine, and it carried them ahead one unsure step at a time. Hope sat on the side of her bed, staring at the small pink lines on her pregnancy test. Her hands trembled, not in surprise, but as a subtle affirmation of what she had previously felt deep within her body. For days she had been exhausted, restless, and emotional in strange ways. But now that she was confronted with the truth, she let out a soft sob. It was not intended to be like this. Not now. Not after what had happened between her and Carter. Carter had been her safe haven once. The tranquility in a world that might be brutal and unpredictable at times. They had met 2 years ago at a seemingly fateful moment. A coffee shop encounter, a spilled drink, and a grin that altered everything. However, the love that began with laughing has ended in stillness. Too many misunderstandings and unspoken words. Carter's world was founded on order, whereas Hope's heart was driven by passion, and they had drifted apart until all that remained were apologies delivered too late. She believed that ending things had been the proper decision. They were hurting each other, and Hope reminded herself that it was better to let go than to continue bleeding love. But as she pushed her hand on her stomach, the weight of what had been lost struck her harder than she had anticipated. It wasn't just about her anymore. There was life inside her, a faint heartbeat that linked her to the guy she had tried so hard to forget. When she eventually contacted Finn, she struggled to communicate. Finn was more than simply a friend. He had always served as her quiet guardian, a doctor who had known her family for years, and could understand her feelings even when she couldn't express them. When he answered the phone, his voice was firm as it always was, but she could sense the concern behind it. "Hope? What is wrong?" "I need to see you," she muttered. "It's important." Within an hour, she was sitting in his little office, the walls painted a light blue and adorned with images of nature and handwritten letters from patients praising him for his generosity. Finn had that kind of soul. Compassionate, grounded, and patient. He did not respond immediately when she showed him the test. He simply looked at her, the grief in his eyes matching hers. "Hope," he murmured quietly, "you'll be okay. But does Carter know?" She shook her head. "We haven't spoken for weeks. We brought everything to an end. I can't simply come up and tell him this. He made it apparent that he was done with me." Finn groaned and leaned back. When people are hurt, they say things they do not mean. But he has a right to know. Hope twisted her hands together. "What if he does not want it? What if he looks at me and notices an error?" Finn hesitated, then reached across the desk and placed his hand on hers. "Then you'll still have folks who care for you. You are not alone, Hope. Not now, not ever." She wished to trust him. However, loneliness has a habit of resonating louder when there was supposed to be consolation. Meanwhile, Carter had tried to move on, but it felt like walking through fog. Every location he walked appeared to have a trace of her. The scent of coffee in the morning, the sound of her laugh echoing down halls that used to feel familiar. He assured himself that ending things was the correct decision. Hope wanted more than he could provide. She required commitments he wasn't certain he could keep. But the truth was far simpler and sadder. Carter was terrified. He was frightened of failing, of loving someone who deserved better than the broken man he saw in the mirror. When Finn sent him a message asking him to meet, he almost disregarded it. But something about the tone made him uneasy. Finn rarely contacted out unless the situation was serious. So he went to the small cafe near the hospital, which he had previously visited with Hope. Finn came a few minutes later, his normally calm demeanor overshadowed by something heavier. They sat down and neither spoke for a time. "It's Hope," Finn finally said. Carter froze. "What about her? Is she okay?" "She's pregnant." The world appeared to tilt. Carter blinked as if the term itself made no sense. "Pregnant? Are you certain?" "She took numerous tests," Finn explained quietly, "and she came to me to confirm it." Carter stopped breathing for a time. The thought of Hope bearing his kid, which was both beautiful and sad, struck him at once. "Why didn't she tell you?" he mumbled, his voice breaking. "Because she's scared," Finn answered softly. "She thinks you have moved on. She doesn't want to complicate things." Carter's jaw tightened, shame flooding his chest. "She should have known I'd never walk away from that." Finn gave him a long, inscrutable glance. "You've already walked away once, Carter. Maybe she doesn't believe you'd remain." Carter wasn't expecting those words to hit so hard. Days passed before he mustered the guts to visit her. When she opened the door, she appeared delicate in a way he had never seen before. Her eyes were red from sobbing, her hair was loosely tied, and one hand reflexively rested on her tummy. Neither spoke for very long.